listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Welcome to The Briefing. What does it take to cancel a powerful male celebrity? Experts say women, people of colour or queer people get flattened for their mistakes, while some men are just labelled complex and are able to bounce right back.
I think it's just misogyny and sexism, that we live in a patriarchal society that favours men and doesn't favour anyone else.
So why are people calling for us to get some male celebs like Brad Pitt and Chris Brown out of our pass baskets is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Tuesday, the 15th of July.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, we're kicking things off in the US where Donald Trump has threatened Russia with steep tariffs if a peace deal with Ukraine isn't reached within 50 days.
We've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with Russia and Ukraine, and we want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is.
That's the US president speaking from the Oval Office there, and it's important to note that no reputable outlet has been able to verify that $350 billion price tag. Experts and think tanks place the figure the US has spent on Ukraine more closely between $120 and $200 billion. Look, still a big amount.
Yeah, and he did make those comments after his meeting with NATO chief Mark Rutte, you know, the bloke who referred to him as daddy not too long ago. And that was after they had reached a new weapons deal for Ukraine.
In a nutshell, we're going to make top-of-the-line weapons and they'll be sent to NATO.
Which is a pretty accurate summary there. He actually went on to say that the US would be sending Ukraine billions of dollars worth of missiles and air defense systems, with NATO nations, not the US, footing the bill. Now, why this tech is important and comes at a very critical time, Tara, is because it's what Ukraine has been asking the US and its allies for amid these ongoing and rising aerial attacks that are coming from Russia. They've actually ramped up in severity and frequency over the last few weeks. And, you know, these air defense systems are pretty much the only technology that can help Ukraine defend itself in this area. And of course, the NATO deal is very much in keeping with Trump's rhetoric that Europe needs to be doing the heavy lifting on, you know, conflicts closer to the EU and not closer to the US. But also very briefly on these sanctions, a lot of experts this morning are saying that they are largely symbolic because Russia's done a pretty good job over the last few years of cocooning itself from Western sanctions. They've managed to, you know, strengthen their ties with allies, defense allies like North Korea, who's sending them thousands of troops and weapons. And they've actually deepened economic cooperation through BRICS, which, you know, involves Brazil, India, China, and South Africa. That's how they've managed to keep money flowing and going through the country. So, yeah, US tariffs aren't really something that's going to be leaving a heavy mark on Putin this morning.
Back home now, where a former Greens candidate who was severely injured during an arrest is due to front court today over a demonstration which turned violent and which police claim was unauthorised. Hannah Thomas, a 35-year-old who ran against the Prime Minister in the recent election, is facing charges of resisting police and not following a move-on order relating to the pro-Palestine protest she took part in at SEC Plating in Sydney's southwest last month. Now, this business is accused of manufacturing parts for military jets being used in the war in Gaza. However, the business denies that.
Hannah's alleging police used excessive force during her arrest, punching her in the face so badly that it left her with blood pouring out of one of her eyes, the same eye she says doctors have warned she might lose vision in permanently. Her lawyers say she will be suing the state of New South Wales and is calling for police to drop her charges over what they say was clear police brutality captured on body cam vision.
Yeah, and meanwhile, in a separate incident, police are also investigating a video that's been shared by the Australian Jewish Association, and it appears to show a person donned in a Palestine flag taking ownership for an arson attack on a separate Melbourne tech business earlier this month, one that's also been accused of supplying parts for fighter jets for use in the war.
This is an anonymous communique by the cell that torched 3 cars at Lovett Technologies. Let there be no illusions as to what this was. This was not an accident nor thoughtless vandalism. This is a clear and serious threat. If you continue making weapons components of any kind, there will be consequences. Consider this a warning.
Now, in the video, the person goes on to claim that every worker in the supply chain is complicit and ends by discussing genocide in Australia with Aboriginal flags displayed in the foreground and saying, "Death to Israel, death to Australia, death to America." Now, one thing worth mentioning here, while the video is circulating, it's been posted and the police have confirmed they are looking into it, as well as the counter-terrorism team and AFP are investigating the attack on Lovett Tech, the video is yet to be verified to actually determine if these threats are legitimate and if it is actually the same group. So just take that with a grain of salt for the moment. And it's also worth noting that while this particular video, the person is wearing a Palestine flag and says death to Israel, we also know that there has been earlier crimes that have been paid for hire type crimes that have been committed to further stir up hate and unrest and anger between Palestinians and Jewish people. So while I'm not saying that's what's taken place here, it's important to note that that has happened in relation to these events.
Yeah, and there is precedent for this. You know, we heard similar language around the caravan terror plot that was sold to us as, you know, this mass casualty event. Police came out after the fact to say that criminals were paid to pretty much instill, you know, fear in the community over that. Something similar happened yesterday over an alleged firebombing of a synagogue. The prosecution is now alleging that it wasn't in fact a hate crime, rather a crime motivated by payment. Again, this idea of air tasker for criminals and that criminals are being paid to instill hatred and fear in the community.
A German backpacker who survived 11 nights lost in remote Western Australia says she had wandered away from her car in a confused state after crashing it and hitting her head. Carolina Wilger shared a heartfelt message to Aussies from her hospital bed after enduring sub-zero temperatures with limited food, footwear and water before a farmer came to her rescue about a week and a half later, Chris.
Wow, and in her first public comment since the incident, the 26-year-old shared her thanks from the bottom of her heart and soul for the supporters who helped look for her for days on end. She says she's certain she only survived the incident thanks to the incredible outpouring of support she's received, those who believed in her and those who've cared for her since and shown her compassion, with a special mention for a woman called Tanya, which Carolina has labelled as her angel, and that is the one that found her. It is also very mushy and cute.
Yeah, and according to Carolina, she said that she'd seen people question kind of why she left her car when that was where she had food and water and clothing. But yeah, she wanted to clarify that she actually lost control of her car down a slope and significantly hit her head and was in a dazed and confused state when she did wander off. And she just finished by saying she is just simply beyond grateful to have survived and thank you, Australia, you were amazing. And that was posted by WA Police to their socials, along with a very lovely, happy picture of her safe and sound Carolina smiling in a hospital bed with some flowers and clutching a teddy.
Oh, it's such a good ending to this story because honestly, when they were putting out the police alerts, I was just thinking, oh, now we're getting into day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. Like, hope does start to fade, and especially now that it's winter, it's very impressive.
And often in these cases, like having covered a lot of these stories over the years, a lot of them end in tragedy. And so you kind of just have that preconceived, worry that it's not going to go well. So it's always awesome when they end up being a happy ending. And good on her for surviving drinking on puddles in sub-zero temperatures. That's incredible. Very lucky.
Around 1 in 3 young workers in Australia are exploited by their employers, according to a new study, many reporting below minimum wage, no breaks, and being given food as payment. The research by Melbourne Uni's law school involved more than 2,800 workers under the age of 30 and found a third of them were paid $15 an hour or less, well below the $24.95 minimum. Also finding 36% of them were forbidden from taking entitled breaks, and around 1 in 4 were not paid their super.
Yeah, and it also found that about 60% of young workers had also been made to pay for work-related items or activities, and that includes training and uniforms, while 34% hadn't been paid during a trial period. 1 in 5 had been paid off the books, and around 1 in 10 were paid in food or products. Now, the study's lead, Professor John Howe, says wage exploitation is rife, and young workers are really easy targets as they often don't know their rights and are too worried about losing their jobs to speak up. And I mean, I can speak from experience, Chris. pretty much would say I've ticked all of those off my list over the years, working in different cafes and whatnot. Like, you're just happy to have a job. You don't want to ruffle feathers.
Yeah, which is so true. And I mean, not getting paid for trials is something that I'm okay with, so long as it's something that's temporary. You know, you can't be putting a worker on a trial for like 3 months on end and going, we're still trialing them. They haven't passed probation. We're not going to pay them properly. The one that hurts me is uniform, because according to, you know, the Fair Work Act, Tara Cassidy, you shouldn't have to pay out of pocket for things that are reasonably connected to your employment, and that includes uniforms. Can you tell I have an axe to grind with a former employer? And look, I've also been paid in food, which I welcomed for a long time as an event photographer, but food doesn't pay the bills, Tara. Food does not pay the bills.
And a Sydney man has been charged with malicious mischief after allegedly damaging a case while trying to break in to get the Stone of Scone in Scotland. Now, for those that don't know what the Stone of Scone is, or its other name, the Stone of Destiny, I mean, obviously it's very important sounding. It is an ancient sandstone block that's been used in coronations for centuries, so dating back at least 1,200 years, and it is the world's oldest artefact, and it's still used to make monarchs.
Yeah, now a 35-year-old Sydney man, Arnold Logan, set to appear in a Scotland court today on the charges, which are similar to vandalism type offences in Australia, and he's accused of donning a kilt while attempting to smash the case that contains the royal rock. Now, this happened at the Perth Museum in Scotland, where the rock currently is, but there's a bit of controversy around it. It was stolen for some time, then it was taken and held in Westminster Abbey in London for about 700 years, only ever to be taken out for special occasions.
Yes, special occasions being the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III, and it goes back to the crowning, apparently, of Scottish kings like Macbeth and later immortalised by William Shakespeare. I mean, Chris, the only thing I'm left thinking is, why? What will you, Anna, do with the Stone of Destiny? What drove this?
Really, the only thing I can think about is that scene in Thor where his hammer is stuck in the rock and it's a massive show of strength. Like, if you do manage to break in and steal the rock and have it in your living room for when someone comes over, you can go, I did that. It's bragging rights, Tara Cassidy. It's bragging rights.
Yeah, I guess we heard about that group that tried to steal the golden toilet overseas as well. So there must be a thing. This is a thing. Okay. People like to steal strange things, I'm learning.
Yeah, and I mean at the expense of our royals. Oh, gosh. Anyway, that is it for headlines for today. Up next is Helen Smith's Deep Dive, looking into some of the world's favourite male celebrities and why it seems that they are just uncancellable. Stick around, that deep dive is coming up for you next.
People are calling for Brad Pitt, Johnny Depp and Chris Brown to get out of your pass basket over allegations of abuse. Angelina Jolie accused Brad Pitt of being abusive to her and two of their children on a private jet in 2016. Pitt was not charged following a police investigation and has denied the allegations. Johnny Depp won his defamation case in 2022 against ex-wife Amber Heard after she alleged she was a domestic abuse victim. And in 2020, a UK court found that Depp abused Heard on at least 12 occasions, which he denies. Chris Brown is currently facing charges of assault over an alleged bottle attack at a London nightclub in 2023, pleading not guilty. The singer has previously been charged with felony assault against his ex-girlfriend Rihanna back in 2009. Georgia Grace is a sex and relationship practitioner and somatic therapist who made a post on Instagram calling for us to get him out of your pass basket. Georgia, firstly, what does the phrase mean?
Basically, a pass basket is a social or cultural term whereby we give often people with power, celebrities, a pass for their harmful behaviour. So when I said get him out of your pass basket, I'm essentially saying get these male celebrities who have serious allegations of harm or violence against them out of your past basket. Stop seeing them as the sexy, charming men and dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and speaking about your post that you made on Instagram, why has this conversation about men who have either been charged or allegedly been perpetrators of violence, for example, popped back up again?
Yeah, I think it's popped back up again recently because we're seeing a lot of comeback tours. So Chris Brown is selling out stadiums, thousands of people are going to see him perform. Brad Pitt is doing promotions for his new movie F1 and that's spoken about as a comeback tour. Johnny Depp had an interview in The Australian the other day, and I've also seen him across my social media feed going to hospitals to perform as Captain Jack Sparrow for sick children. So I think it's popping up because a lot of these male celebrities who have allegations of violence and harm are kind of doing the rounds in this sort of press junket media thing. And it seems like a lot of people are forgetting what was making headlines or what has been making headlines.
I want to kind of talk about this in the bigger, broader sense, because a lot of the conversations come back to we're allowing these men to be complex. That's the framing that people say they're complex or there's layers to them, while women, non-binary people, people of colour, trans people, just giving some examples, are often flattened by their mistakes. Why do you think that doesn't happen for a man like Brad Pitt, for example?
I think it's just misogyny and sexism, that we live in a patriarchal society that favours men and doesn't favour anyone else. And this has been the really interesting thing, that sort of men, particularly artists or performers, actors, are afforded the opportunity to be tortured or to struggle, to be complex, as you were saying, Helen. And that same, I guess, idea isn't afforded to women. I think I am by no means a royalist, but I think it's really interesting to see the ways in which people really, really dislike to even hate someone like Meghan Markle. They find her annoying and frustrating and infuriating, but she doesn't have any allegations of violence or harm against her, and she's vilified constantly in the media. And celebrities hold a lot of power, financial, their status, they're deeply connected. And it is people in these positions of power that often will be able to get away with things or will be handed the benefit of the doubt. And it's interesting how it is certain genders or certain identities that are given more of that bandwidth.
And you mentioned there about the artist. When people say you have to separate the art from the artist, what are they really asking us to overlook?
They're essentially saying we don't want to hold men accountable. But these artists aren't separating themselves from their art, and actually they will do a lot to deeply embed the love of their art into, say, these court cases. Like Johnny Depp, he had fans out the front dressing up as Captain Jack Sparrow. That is not separating the art from the artist. But what we're essentially trying to do is not hold these men accountable. And I think that can feel deeply uncomfortable for people, because they see these celebrities or they see these performers and they idolize them. Maybe their art has had a huge impact on them, or it has influenced them in some way, or made them feel all of these amazing things when they see their movies or they dance to their music. And it can feel really confronting when this person you love so much, you start to have to face these ideas that actually maybe they have caused harm. Maybe they're not this perfect person that I expected them to be. And that can feel really confronting.
Do you think that will ever change? Because do you think people who might, love their favourite celebrity or artist, if they really care about serious allegations of abuse, or if they're just keyboard warriors and they want to seem like they're so righteous and they're doing the right thing until it comes to their favourite celebrity?
I think it can change if people are willing to change their way of thinking, if they're willing to be slightly uncomfortable, if they're willing to go beyond their algorithm or go beyond their Google search that will feed them the same kind of information that they're looking for and seek out a different perspective, then yes, absolutely, I think people can change. Another interesting thing I found was the amount of people who were saying, what did Brad Pitt do? And I mean, this isn't news to me. I've been well across these allegations and sort of the legal reports of his alleged violence against his wife and his children in 2016. So yes, I think people can change if they are willing to accept that the people they idolize or the people they love aren't perfect. And if there are allegations, maybe we need to start believing victims and survivors of violence and assault.
An argument to that could be, well, he hasn't been charged, he hasn't been found guilty. What do you say to that?
I think that this is, a lot of people don't understand the legal system. They don't understand what it takes, firstly, for someone to want to go through this process. And if someone has been assaulted, if they have been a victim or survivor of violence, they will often get counsel, or legal counsel, that will suggest and warn them this is going to be a painful, ongoing, traumatizing, long battle. Are you willing to go through with this? And so that is essentially telling the victim survivor that this is going to be really, really hard for you. It might also cost you a whole lot of money. Are you willing to do this? When people hear that, they think that sounds awful, incredibly hard. People aren't going to believe me. So they may step away from it. Even if someone is convicted, like Chris Brown, he was convicted of felony assault against his ex-girlfriend and attacking Rihanna. But despite this, people still want to love and adore him. And they say, we think he's been through enough. We think he's paid for that. So when people say that they're just allegations, that is such an easy way to ignore and essentially say that you're not believing victim survivors. It is far more complex than that.
Speaking of Chris Brown, a video that you included in your post also at a concert recently kind of went viral, and it was asking fans at the concert if they knew about his charges, recent cases, and it was filming the reactions of the fans. What did this say about how we can prioritise talent over harm?
That video, I think, was so fascinating because it had both people who knew all of this information, and a lot of people were coming back and saying, yeah, but I heard that one was withdrawn, or I actually heard that doesn't exist anymore. So they were wanting and intentionally being really selective with the information that they were holding on to. I think as consumers, it's really important for us to think about where we're putting our money and if that aligns with our values.
Is this issue unique to celebrity culture, or do we see these similar dynamics play out in our everyday life and even in workplaces in Australia? I'm thinking like in the corporate world or in government.
I don't think it is just afforded to celebrities. I think it is afforded to people in power, wealthy people, people who are conventionally attractive. They are allowed to be flawed and complex or cruel or abusive. And I think what this suggests is that sometimes it's easier for people to get over the fact that, someone in a position of power has done something wrong than it is to, sit with the discomfort of your idea of them being challenged. So male celebrities who are sort of conventionally attractive and wealthy and hold a lot of power, they will be able to get away with more. It's not just within Hollywood that we see these dynamics.
So how do we shift the conversation so that we value a person's safety as much as we do value someone's genius per se?
I think that that question is a question we need to ask ourselves. When we hear these redemption tours or when we hear these men coming back, essentially what we're saying is that his talent or his genius is more important than someone else's safety. I think there's so much that we need to do in terms of reform and creating safety and education, but also dismantling these structures that, exist within our society whereby the people who hold power hold so much power. When we value that power more than collective or individual safety, essentially we're just giving them the green card to go and do anything. And don't worry, because your PR teams will be there to pick up the mess.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as you mentioned before, the power of a consumer, actually we hold a lot more power than sometimes we think we might. But Georgia, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That was Georgia Grace, sex and relationship practitioner and somatic therapist and author. And that's it for this ep of The Briefing. We'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might want to have a listen. It's a really easy way you can support everything we do here at The Briefing. And you can follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. And if you or anyone you know does need help, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or 1-800-RESPECT. That's 1-800-737 732. I'm Helen Smith. See you next time.
Listener.